A street girl overheard a limousine driver speaking in Arabic about a suspicious plan. Terrified, she ran to the millionaire and begged him not to get in the car. He almost ignored it, but something she said made him stop and changed everything. Before listening to this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting tales. The morning sun was already beating down on the asphalt when Chiara woke up that Friday. As usual, she styled her curly hair into a makeshift bun and put on the only unripped t-shirt she owned. On the other side of the small room, her grandmother Helena was already preparing weak coffee in the old aluminum coffee maker. "Good morning, my little eagle," said Helena, with that accent she had never abandoned even after decades living in Brazil. Her eyes, deep and dark like ripe olives, held stories that her voice rarely told in full. Chiara smiled in response, adjusting her holey socks before putting on her worn-out sneakers. She knew she needed to bring something home today. The bills were overdue, and the rent for her small apartment on the outskirts of the capital was due in 3 days. "I'm going to look for bottle caps today, Grandma. Near that big building, you know. There are a lot of rich people there who throw them away without even realizing it," she explained, while swallowing a piece of stale bread. Helena made a gesture with her hand, as if shooing away an imaginary fly. "Be careful with the eyes of others. Not everyone who smiles is a friend, nor is everyone who frowns an enemy." It was one of the many sayings Helena repeated, the result of a life marked by upheavals in her homeland before fleeing to Brazil. Chiara knew that her grandmother carried invisible scars. As a war refugee, Helena had arrived in the country with little more than falsified documents and a baby in her arms. Chiara's mother, who later disappeared after a troubled relationship, leaving the girl in her grandmother's care. "I'm always alert, Grandma, just like you taught me," Chiara replied, kissing the old woman's wrinkled face. And indeed she was. At 12 years old, she possessed a keen perception, a legacy of Helena's teachings, who had passed on to her not only words of caution, but also the Arabic language and stories of survival. Learning the language began as a game when Chiara was only 5 years old. "So we never forget who we are," Helena would say, while teaching her granddaughter the winding letters and guttural sounds that made up her mother tongue. "Knowledge is the only thing that no one can steal from you." With a cloth bag slung over her shoulder and determination in her eyes, Chiara set off for her daily collection. Hopping between the potholes of the broken sidewalks, she left behind the neighborhood of low buildings and makeshift tenements, heading towards the upscale part of the city, where mirrored glass office buildings reflected the sky and concealed fortunes. The destination was always the same: the outskirts of the Allianz Tower, an imposing 50-story skyscraper that housed one of the country's largest technology companies. There, executives and employees discarded cans and bottles with caps that were valuable to those who made a living collecting recyclables. Chiara knew the best times and places to go. She knew when nearby restaurants took out their trash and when employees left for lunch, leaving behind disposable containers. But that morning, something different caught her attention. While rummaging under a Mercedes parked in the shade, male voices reached her ears. It wasn't the heavily accented Portuguese she was used to hearing, but Arabic, the very language Helena had insisted on teaching her, even when Chiara questioned its practical usefulness. "Nakhtabi hatta yadkhul, thumma najlibuhu abr al-nafaq." The words floated toward her like fragments of a puzzle. "Hide when he enters. Bring him through the tunnel." Chiara froze, her heart racing like a frightened little bird. The men were talking near a black limousine parked in the building's VIP entrance. Instinctively, she cowered behind a car, trying to process what she had just heard. There was no mention of explosives or weapons, but something inside her, that intuition Helena always called the voice of the ancestors, screamed that there was danger in those whispered words. Observing carefully, he saw a tall, thin man in an impeccable suit discreetly signal to the limousine driver. They exchanged furtive glances before parting ways, like actors who know their roles perfectly without needing rehearsal. It was then that the building's main door opened, and a group of security guards in dark suits emerged, forming a human corridor. In the center walked a middle-aged man with grey hair and an imposing posture. Even from a distance, Chiara could sense his importance by the way everyone around him moved in response to him. "Shamstone all of this," he thought, remembering the stories he heard in the neighborhood about Marco Allianz, the billionaire who ran the tech empire, and whose fortune was the subject of constant speculation. A wave of panic washed over her when she saw the man heading towards the same limousine where the men were conversing in Arabic. Without a second thought, Chiara dropped her bag of bottle caps and ran. "Sir, sir, please," she shouted, pushing through the security cordon before any guard could stop her. The guards reacted immediately, but she was faster, sliding between them like water between stones. She arrived breathless before the man, who looked at her with a mixture of surprise and irritation. One of the security guards was already holding her arm when she finally managed to speak. "Don't get in that car. I heard..." In Arabic, they talked about a tunnel, about hiding when you got in. The man, whom Chiara now confirmed to be Marco Allianz himself, frowned. His gaze, initially impatient, shifted to examining her with interest. With a gesture, he caused the security guard to loosen his grip on her arm. "What are you talking about, girl?" he asked in a deep, controlled voice. Taking a deep breath, Chiara repeated what she had heard, this time translating the complete sentences from Arabic. She mentioned the tunnel, the plan to wait for her to get into the vehicle. The words whispered between the driver and the man in the suit. One of the security guards, who seemed to have more authority than the others, stepped forward. "Mr. Allianz, we can't be late for the meeting because of a street kid's costumes. He's probably just looking for attention or some money." Marco, however, didn't take his eyes off Chiara. There was something about the conviction of that girl in her worn clothes and intense gaze that prevented him from simply ignoring her. Furthermore, one specific detail intrigued him. "How do you know Arabic?" he asked in a lower, almost confidential tone. "My grandmother Helena taught me. She came from there, fleeing the war," Chiara replied, feeling the weight of all eyes on her. Marco seemed to ponder for a few seconds. Then, with a sudden decision, he turned to his team. "Victor," the head of security called, "I want a full vehicle inspection and an investigation into the driver. Now." The security guard who had tried to discredit Chiara stepped forward again. "Sir, with all due respect, this is absurd. Theo has been with us for months. He passed all the security protocols." "And since when do you question my orders, Aaron?" Marco retorted coldly. "I said thorough check. Meanwhile, we'll return to the building." A murmur arose among the employees as Marco walked away from the limousine, keeping Chiara by his side. "Come with me, little one. I want to hear exactly what you heard. Every word." As they walked back to the entrance of the imposing building, Chiara felt Aaron's furious gaze on her back. Something told her that this man wasn't just skeptical. He seemed personally bothered by her intervention. In the main lobby, before they entered the executive elevator, Chiara gently tugged at the sleeve of Marco's jacket. "I need to go home. My grandmother will be worried. And I don't think I'm dressed to go in there." Marco smiled for the first time. "Don't worry about it. Let's just talk in a safe place, and then someone will take you home." The elevator silently ascended to the top floor, where the doors opened onto a universe Chiara only knew from movies. A spacious office with panoramic city views, furnished with pieces that likely cost more than her entire lifetime's rent. Marco led her to a leather sofa and asked her to repeat everything again, this time in more detail. As she spoke, he watched her intently, as if evaluating not only her words but every facial expression, every nervous gesture. "Your name is..." he asked when she finished. "Chiara," she replied, looking at her own worn-out sneakers, suddenly aware of the contrast between herself and that environment. "Well, Chiara," said Marco, leaning slightly toward her, "you've just done something very brave, and if I'm right, something very important as well." At that moment, the phone on the table rang. Marco answered with a serious expression, listened for a few seconds, and nodded before hanging up. "It seems your intuition was correct," he said, looking at Chiara with an expression that mixed admiration and concern. "They found something in the limousine, something that shouldn't be there." Chiara felt a shiver run down her spine. Helena's words echoed in her mind. "Trust what your eyes don't see but your heart feels." Meanwhile, nearby, out of their sight, a man in a suit watched everything through the mirrored glass, rapidly typing a message on his cell phone. The game had only just begun. While Marco made calls in his office, Chiara remained seated on the leather sofa, feeling out of place in that luxurious setting. Her eyes wandered over the details of the room, the abstract paintings on the walls, the awards for business excellence, the photographs of Marco with important personalities. It was a world completely different from hers, and yet, by some irony of fate, their paths had crossed. "You must be hungry," Marco said, hanging up the phone. He pressed a button on his desk, and minutes later, a young secretary entered, carrying a tray with sandwiches, fruit, and a glass of juice. Chiara hesitated before accepting the food. Helena always said that accepting gifts from strangers created invisible debts. But her stomach won out, and soon she was devouring a sandwich while Marco continued organizing what seemed to be an investigation. "Victor is checking the security cameras and the driver's history," Marco explained, noticing the girl's curious interest. "What they found in the limousine was a kit with substances that could render me unconscious, hidden under the seat." The girl swallowed hard. It wasn't just her grandmother's paranoia. Something sinister was really happening. "Who would do that? Why?" she asked, her small voice echoing in the spacious office. Marco sighed, running a hand through his grey hair. "I have many competitors, people who would like access to my projects, to my contracts. This wouldn't be the first attack against me or my company." At that moment, the office door opened, and Victor entered, accompanied by a middle-aged woman with brown hair tied in a severe bun and a sharp gaze behind thin-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Alliance, this is Olivia from the Digital Security Department. She found something you need to see," Victor announced, his expression more worried than before. Marco gestured for them to come closer. Olivia opened her laptop on the table and showed a series of graphs and codes that seemed completely incomprehensible to Chiara. "We detected an unusual pattern of attempts to access our main servers," Olivia explained, pointing to the colored lines on the screen. "They started exactly when you were supposed to be leaving the building. It looks like a coordinated attempt at a digital intrusion." Marco frowned. "Are you telling me there are two simultaneous operations? The limousine operation and this attempted break-in?" Olivia nodded deeply. "Yes, and furthermore, we've identified the source of some of the attempts. They come from within our own system, which suggests that someone has infiltrated the company." Chiara watched the conversation in silence, but her mind worked rapidly. Helena's stories about surveillance and betrayal seemed to come alive before her eyes. While the adults discussed codes and firewalls, she thought about the Arabic words she had heard, trying to recall any detail she might have missed. "I need to go back," he said suddenly, getting up from the sofa. "My grandmother will be worried, and maybe I can find out more things out there." Victor and Olivia looked at the girl suspiciously, but Marco seemed to understand her unease. "I'll arrange for her to be taken home, Chiara, but I need you to promise me something. Don't get involved in this anymore. You've already done a lot by alerting me. Now let my team handle the problem." Chiara nodded, although deep down she knew she couldn't simply forget all of that. Not when she felt she could help, that she could make a difference. After arranging for a trusted driver to take her home, she got out of the car accompanied by an administrative assistant named Fiona, a woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and a tired smile. "You're very brave," Fiona commented in the elevator. "Most people would prefer not to get involved." Chiara shrugged. "My grandmother says that closing your eyes to danger doesn't make it disappear." Fiona observed her with curiosity. "Your grandmother seems like a wise woman." "She is," Chiara replied proudly. "She survived things people only see in movies." When they reached the ground floor, however, something caught Chiara's attention. Through the glass doors, she saw the same man in a suit who had been talking near the limousine. He was on the other side of the street, apparently talking on his cell phone, but his eyes were fixed on the building's entrance. "Wait," he murmured, holding Fiona's arm. "That man, he was with the driver earlier." Fiona followed his gaze, squinting to see better. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Chiara stated. "He spoke Arabic." The administrative assistant bit her lower lip thoughtfully. "We should inform Mr. Alliance." But Chiara had another idea. "Wait, if we go back now, he might disappear. We have to find out more." "Us?" No, Fiona shook her head vehemently. "You're a child, and I'm just an administrative assistant. We're not secret agents." "Please," Chiara insisted, her eyes shining with determination. "I have something that can help." Before Fiona could answer, Chiara pulled a small rectangular object from her pocket, an old cell phone, with the screen cracked in one corner. "My grandmother gave it to me for emergencies. The camera still works. Fiona seemed torn between the responsibility of protecting that child and a strange curiosity that was beginning to awaken within her. There was something in Chiara's conviction that reminded her of herself when she was younger, before the disappointments of adult life made her so cautious. 15 minutes, he finally conceded. We can observe for 15 minutes, from a distance, and then we'll come back to tell Mr. Allianz. With an improvised plan, the two left through a less visible side entrance. Chiara discreetly kept her cell phone pointed at the suspicious man, recording his movements while they pretended to wait for a ride. It wasn't long before the man was approached by another person, one of the building's security guards, whom Chiara immediately recognized. It was Aaron, the same one who had tried to discredit her warning about the limousine. "Look," she whispered to Fiona. "It's the security guard who didn't want Mr. Allianz to hear me." Fiona narrowed her eyes, observing the interaction between the two men. They spoke in low voices, with restrained gestures but evident tension in their shoulders. "Keep recording," she murmured, now completely engrossed in the impromptu investigation. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but it was enough for Chiara to capture the moment when Aaron discreetly handed a small USB drive to the man in the suit, who quickly put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. "Did you see that?" exclaimed Chiara, almost forgetting to keep her voice down. Fiona nodded, her face pale. "We need to go back. Now." But before they could move, the man in the suit looked in their direction. For a terrifying moment, Chiara feared they had been discovered. The man frowned as if trying to decide if he recognized them and began to walk towards them. "Come on," said Fiona, pulling Chiara by the arm. "Just act natural." They began walking toward the building's main entrance, trying to maintain a casual pace while feeling the man's gaze on their backs. Chiara resisted the urge to look back, remembering Helena's advice. Never let a predator know you've seen him. When they finally entered the lobby, Fiona let out a sigh of relief. "We need to show this to Mr. Allianz immediately." In the elevator, on her way to the executive floor, Chiara reviewed the video she had recorded. The quality wasn't excellent due to the distance and the old camera, but it was possible to clearly identify the faces of Aaron and the mysterious man, as well as the moment the pen drive was handed over. "You really are extraordinary," Fiona commented, observing the girl's determination. "Where does all this courage come from?" Chiara shrugged, uncomfortable with the compliment. "It's not courage, it's just doing what feels right, you know." When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, they were greeted by a tense atmosphere. Marco was meeting with Victor, Olivia, and other executives in a makeshift crisis room. All faces turned toward them as they entered. "Mr. Allianz," Fiona called, stepping forward. "The girl has accomplished something important." Marco frowned when he saw them, clearly surprised that they had returned. "What happened to taking her home?" "We found evidence that your head of security, Aaron, is involved in the conspiracy," Fiona explained, her voice trembling slightly with the gravity of the accusation. A heavy silence fell over the room. Victor took a step forward, his face a mask of disbelief. "That's a serious accusation," he said, looking from Fiona to Chiara. "Aaron has been my trusted man for years." "We have proof," Chiara replied, handing her cell phone to Marco. "We just saw him hand something to the man who was with the limousine driver." Marco picked up the device and, along with the others, watched the video recorded by Chiara. As the images progressed, everyone's expressions changed, from skepticism to concern, and finally to alarm. "This confirms our suspicions," Olivia said, pointing to her laptop. "The attempts to hack the servers are becoming more aggressive. Someone is trying to access the Project Aurora files." Marco visibly paled upon hearing the project's name. Turning to Victor, he gave quick orders. "Locate Aaron immediately. Don't alert him to our suspicions, but keep him under surveillance, and reinforce security around the main servers." As Victor left to carry out the orders, Marco turned to Chiara and Fiona. "You two took an immense risk," he said, with a mixture of admiration and concern. "But you brought back invaluable information. Project Aurora is the most important work of my life, an artificial intelligence system that could revolutionize how we interact with technology. If it fell into the wrong hands," he didn't finish the sentence, but its weight hung in the air. Chiara could sense the gravity of the situation, even though she didn't fully understand the technical implications. "What can we do to help?" Fiona asked, surprising herself with her own boldness. Marco looked at both of them for a long moment, as if assessing their abilities. "You've already done a lot," he finally replied. "Now, we need to ensure your safety. If Aaron is really involved in this, and he saw you collecting evidence—" A chill ran down Kiara's spine as she realized the implication. She and Fiona could be in danger. "I can't go back home now," she said, thinking of Helena. "What if they find out where I live? My grandmother would be in danger too." Marco nodded gravely. "You're right, we need to protect you and your family. I'll arrange a safe place immediately." Olivia, who had been engrossed in her laptop, suddenly looked up. "Mr. Alliance, we have a new situation. The perimeter security cameras have just captured Aaron rushing out of the building, and he's not alone." Everyone turned to the screen that Olivia had turned towards them. On it, they could see Aaron getting into a dark car accompanied by two men, one of them the same one that Kiara had filmed. "We need to act fast," said Marco, already picking up the phone. They realized they've been found out. While he was making urgent calls, Kiara felt her own cell phone vibrate in her pocket. It was a message from Helena. "Where are you, girl? It's getting dark." "I'm worried." With a heavy heart, Kiara realized that her grandmother had no idea of the whirlwind she had gotten herself into, and now the danger she faced could reach the only family she had left. "I need to let my grandmother know," she said, looking at Fiona with pleading eyes. Fiona squeezed her hand in a comforting gesture. "We'll take care of this. Your grandmother will be safe, I promise." But while the adults moved around her, planning containment and protection strategies, Kiara couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The conspiracy seemed much bigger and more complex than she had initially imagined, and now she was at the center of it all. On the other side of the city, unaware of the approaching danger, Helena stood before the window of her small apartment, watching the sky begin to darken. An unsettling premonition overwhelmed her. That same intuition that had saved her so many times in the past. Something was wrong. Her granddaughter needed her. Helena set her cup of mint tea down on the worn table when the phone rang for the third time. The old device, which rarely received calls, seemed strangely menacing in the silence of the small apartment. With cautious movements, she answered, her accent more pronounced with anxiety. "Hello? Who's speaking?" On the other end of the line, Kiara's voice sounded distant and hurried. "Grandma, it's me. Listen carefully. I don't have much time to explain." Helena felt her heart race. She recognized that tone. It was the same one she herself had used decades ago, when she had to flee her country with only a few hours' notice. "What happened, girl? Where are you?" "I'm safe, Grandma, but I need you to do something for me. Take your bag with the important documents, the one you always keep ready, remember? And go to Mrs. Viola's house. Stay there until I contact you again." The elderly woman gripped the phone tightly. That bag was her escape kit, something she'd kept since wartime. Passports, some savings, essential medications, and irreplaceable photographs. A habit Kiara had always found excessive, until that moment. "What did you do, Kiara?" A brief silence on the other end of the line, then, "I did what you taught me, Grandma. I paid attention. I saw something wrong, and I didn't stay quiet." Helena closed her eyes for a moment, a mixture of pride and terror invading her chest. "Is someone coming after you, after us?" "Maybe. It's just a precaution, but it's best not to risk it. Please, Grandma, go now. Mrs. Viola already knows you're leaving. Someone trustworthy will come to pick you up soon." Before Helena could ask any more questions, the call ended. With the efficiency of someone who had already lived through emergency situations, the elderly woman went to the closet and retrieved a faded canvas bag. She quickly checked its contents, added her charged cell phone and a small photo album she kept on her bedside table, and left, locking the door behind her. As she descended the stairs of the old building, Helena couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. She had fled her country to give her family a peaceful life, only to see the past repeat itself in some mysterious way through her granddaughter. At the Alliance Tower, Marco was organizing a crisis team in his private meeting room. Kiara sat between Fiona and Olivia, still holding her cell phone after her call with her grandmother. "She'll be fine," Fiona assured her, noticing the girl's distressed expression. "We sent one of our most trusted security guards to discreetly monitor her grandmother's building." Marco, who was reviewing some documents with Victor, turned his attention to Kiara. "Your grandmother is Helena Muller, am I right? A Lebanese refugee who arrived in Brazil approximately 30 years ago?" Kiara looked at him in surprise. "How do you know that?" An enigmatic smile appeared on Marco's face. "We have access to certain records. Besides, her name isn't unfamiliar to me, although I can't pinpoint where from." Before they could delve deeper into the conversation, Olivia interrupted them urgently. "We have news about Project Aurora. The latest intrusion attempt managed to bypass 2 security levels. They are getting dangerously close to the core of the system." Marco frowned. "How is that possible? Our protocols are supposed to be impenetrable." "Someone with high-level access is helping," Olivia replied, typing frantically on her laptop. "They're using valid credentials to get through the system. It can only be someone from the company's inner circle." The atmosphere in the room grew even more tense. Marco looked at the faces around him, employees he had known for years, people he trusted to manage his business empire. The idea that there was a traitor among them was deeply disturbing. "Who else has this level of access besides me?" he asked, his voice controlled, but with a hint of restrained anger. Victor consulted a tablet. "Only 5 people. You, me, Olivia, Pietro from the Research and Development Department, and—" He hesitated for a moment. "Luca Carmin, your financial director." Marco placed his hands on the table, absorbing the information. "I want them both here immediately. Pietro and Luca, without raising any suspicion." As Victor left to carry out the order, Chiara watched everything with fascination and apprehension. It was like being inside a spy movie, except the danger was real and the consequences potentially devastating. "What exactly is this Project Aurora?" she asked, her curiosity overcoming her fear. Marco exchanged a glance with Olivia, as if pondering how much he could reveal. After a few seconds, he made up his mind. "Project Aurora is an advanced artificial intelligence capable of predicting complex patterns with unprecedented accuracy. Applied to the financial market, it could anticipate crises and identify opportunities invisible to human analysts. In the right hands, it would represent a huge step forward for global economic stability." He paused significantly. "In the wrong hand, it would be like giving someone the answers to a test before everyone else," Chiara added, simplifying the concept. "They would always win." Marco smiled, impressed by the girl's insight. "Exactly. And not only would they win, they could manipulate the results, create artificial crises, accumulate power in ways we can't even imagine." The door to the room opened, and Victor returned accompanied by 2 men. The first, Pietro, was young, no more than 30, with disheveled curly hair and deep dark circles under his eyes, the perfect image of a computer genius who rarely saw the light of day. The second, Luca, was the opposite, an elegant man of about 50, impeccably dressed and with an air of natural superiority. "Marco, what's going on?" Luca asked, adjusting the cuffs of his Italian shirt. "We were in the middle of a conference with European investors when—" He paused when he noticed Chiara, frowning in obvious disapproval. "And why is there a child in our crisis room?" Marco didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured to Olivia, who turned her laptop around to show something to the newcomers. "We are under attack. Someone is trying to steal Project Aurora, and they have managed to do so using high-level credentials. The kind of credentials that only 5 people in this company possess." Pietro's face visibly paled. "My God, they've reached the core, the neural architecture." Luca, on the other hand, remained impassive. "And what does that have to do with—" He indicated Chiara with a disdainful shake of his head. "This unusual situation." "This young woman," Marco replied firmly, "is the one who uncovered the conspiracy. Thanks to her, we prevented a kidnapping, and possibly something worse. Now we need to find out who's behind it." Chiara watched the 2 men's reactions intently. Pietro seemed genuinely alarmed, furiously typing on a tablet Victor had handed him, muttering about security protocols and firewalls. Luca, on the other hand, maintained a studied composure, though a slight twitch in his left eye betrayed some kind of tension. "And what exactly does the girl say she saw?" Luca asked, his condescending tone barely disguised. Before Marco could intervene, Chiara spoke directly. "I overheard 2 men speaking Arabic about a plan to capture Mr. Allianz as he got into the limousine. They mentioned a tunnel. Then I saw one of them handing something to a security guard named Aaron." Luca raised his eyebrows. "And since when do street children speak Arabic?" "That sounds like a rather convenient story." "My grandmother is Lebanese," Chiara replied, holding Luca's gaze without hesitation. "She taught me the language. And I'm not a street kid. I have a home. I just don't have money." An uncomfortable silence hung in the room after that blunt statement. It was Pietro who broke it, without taking his eyes off his tablet. "I found something. There was access to Aurora's servers using your credentials, Luca. Last night at 11:47 p.m. All eyes turned to the finance director, who showed no reaction other than a slight frown. Impossible. I was at a reception at the Italian consul's residence. Dozens of people can confirm my presence." "The credentials were used," Pietro insisted, showing the access logs, "and not just to view data. Copies of part of the algorithm were made." Marco took a step toward Luca, his expression now somber. "Explain yourself." "It's obvious someone cloned my access card or hacked my passwords," Luca replied calmly. "I'm a victim, not a perpetrator." Olivia, who was still analyzing data on her computer, abruptly raised her head. "There's something strange here. The pattern of intrusion. It's as if they're distracting us with obvious attacks while doing something more subtle in the background." "What do you mean?" Marco asked, turning his attention away from Luca. "Look at these logs." Olivia rotated the screen so everyone could see. "While we have obvious attempts to break through the main defenses, there are a series of small, almost imperceptible accesses in different parts of the system, like they were putting the puzzle together piece by piece instead of trying to steal everything at once." Pietro approached, studying the data with wide eyes. "She's right. It's a fragmentation strategy. They're stealing Aurora in pieces small enough to go unnoticed." "And who would be capable of such a sophisticated strategy?" Marco asked, looking directly at Luca. The finance director held his gaze coldly. "Are you formally accusing me, Marco, after 15 years of working together?" The tension between the two men was palpable. Chiara watched the scene with fascination, trying to decipher every expression, every body movement, just as Helena had taught her. At that moment, Victor's phone rang. He answered quickly, listened for a few seconds, and his face turned serious. "What? When?" A few more seconds of silence. "Maintain absolute discretion. I'm going there now." Hanging up the phone, he addressed Marco. "Sir, Aaron was found unconscious in the underground parking garage. Apparently, he was attacked. He's being taken to the hospital now." The news hit the room like a bombshell. If Aaron was part of the conspiracy, why would he have been attacked? Unless... "He's become disposable," Chiara murmured, drawing everyone's attention. "Or he knows too much." Marco looked at the girl with a newfound level of respect. "Victor, go to the hospital. I want to know his condition and, if possible, what happened." As Victor left, Luca took a step toward the door. "If there are no more unfounded accusations against me, I have an important video conference in 10 minutes. "Stay where you are," Marco ordered, his tone undeniable. "No one leaves this room until we've cleared everything up." A brief flicker of irritation crossed Luca's face before he recoiled, assuming a posture of dignified resignation. Chiara observed this brief moment with particular attention. There was something about Luca's behavior that bothered her, although she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. It was like that feeling Helena described. When the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end for no reason, pay extra attention. Pietro continued working furiously on his tablet, trying to track and block unauthorized access. "I managed to isolate some of the entry points," he announced, "but the damage is already done. Important fragments of the code have been copied." Marco ran a hand through his gray hair, visibly tense. "How much of the project was compromised?" Pietro hesitated, exchanging a glance with Olivia. "It's difficult to be precise at this point. Maybe 30%, maybe more. Enough to give someone a significant advantage, but not enough to completely replicate Aurora." Fiona, who had been silent for most of the discussion, suddenly stood up. "Mr. Alliance, it's past 9 o'clock at night. The girl needs to rest and eat properly." Marco nodded, suddenly aware of how long and stressful that afternoon had been for everyone, especially for Chiara. "You're right, Fiona. Take her to the corporate apartment on the 35th floor. It's safe, and it has everything you might need for now." Chiara, however, didn't seem willing to leave the room. "But what about the investigation? What about my grandmother?" "Your grandmother is safe," Marco assured her. "I have trustworthy people taking care of her. As for the investigation, We will continue working while you rest. We will meet again early tomorrow morning." Reluctantly, Chiara agreed. She was exhausted, and worrying about Helena had drained the rest of her energy. As she left the room, however, she couldn't help but cast one last glance at Luca. The finance director was watching her with a calculating interest that sent a shiver down her spine. In the hallway, as they walked toward the private elevator that would lead to the corporate apartment floor, Fiona noticed the girl's unease. "Is something bothering you besides the obvious?" Chiara bit her lip, unsure how to express her feelings. "That man, Luca, there's something wrong with him. I can't explain it, but I feel like he's acting." Fiona nodded slowly. "I noticed that too. He looks a little false," Chiara added, as if every reaction of his was calculated to appear normal. The elevator arrived, and they both entered in silence. As they ascended, Chiara couldn't shake a growing feeling that, despite all the events of that day, something bigger and more dangerous was yet to come. On the 35th floor, the corporate apartment was a study in minimalist elegance, spacious with panoramic city views and decorated in neutral tones that conveyed sophistication. For Chiara, accustomed to the cramped and simple apartment she shared with Helena, it was like entering another world. "You can use this room," Fiona indicated, opening the door to a spacious suite. "There are clothes in the closet. They're spare uniforms for employees, but there should be something that fits you." Chiara entered the room hesitantly, touching the Egyptian cotton sheets with almost religious reverence. "I've never seen such a big bed." Fiona smiled with a mixture of tenderness and sadness. "I'll prepare something for us to eat. There should be food in the refrigerator." As Fiona headed to the kitchen, Chiara approached the floor-to-ceiling window. Below, the city stretched out like a carpet of pulsating lights. Somewhere in that vast urban labyrinth, her grandmother was hiding, probably just as scared as she was, though she would never admit it. "We'll get through this, Grandma," she whispered against the glass. "Like we always did." Across town, in a small suburban house, Helena sat upright in her friend Viola's living room, an untouched cup of tea before her. Her wrinkled hands gripped the rosary she had carried since her youth, her lips moving in silent prayer. She prayed not only for Chiara, but for all those involved in that web of intrigue, because Helena, more than anyone, knew the price of conspiracies and secrets, and she feared that her granddaughter was about to discover that price in the hardest way possible. The following morning, Chiara awoke disoriented. For a few seconds, she stared bewildered at the spotless white ceiling above her head, so different from the damp patches that decorated the small room she shared with Helena. Reality returned like a wave, the conspiracy, the danger, her hidden grandmother. She got up quickly and found some folded clothes on an armchair, jeans, a t-shirt and a grey sweatshirt with the Allianz Company logo. Fiona had probably provided them during the night. She dressed and, after a brief hesitation in front of the suite's luxurious bathroom, went into the living room. Fiona was already awake, speaking softly on the phone while making coffee in the kitchenette. Noticing Chiara, she smiled and gestured that she would end the call in a minute. "Yes, I understand the seriousness of the situation. No, she's fine. She just woke up. We'll be there in half an hour." After hanging up the phone, Fiona poured Chiara a glass of orange juice. "Did you sleep well?" Chiara shrugged. "More or less. I dreamt about my grandmother." "We have good news about her," said Fiona, placing a plate of toast and scrambled eggs on the counter. "She's safe at her friend's house, and one of our security agents is discreetly positioned in the neighborhood." Chiara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Can I talk to her?" "After the meeting with Mr. Allianz. He wants to see us immediately. It seems there have been developments overnight." While eating quickly, Chiara observed the city through the panoramic window. In the morning light, the megalopolis seemed less threatening, more transparent in its daily workings. Hurried people headed to work. Buildings reflected the rising sun. Life went on as usual. It was hard to believe that, amidst that apparent normality, a conspiracy was unfolding. 20 minutes later, Chiara and Fiona descended in the executive elevator to the president's floor. The atmosphere in Marco's office was noticeably different from the previous day. More people, more equipment, a constant murmur of tense voices, and the sound of keys being frantically pressed. Marco was at the center of this organized chaos, issuing orders and analyzing reports. Upon seeing Chiara and Fiona, he gestured for them to come closer. "Good morning. I hope you were able to rest, because we have a long day ahead of us. Chiara noticed deep dark circles under Marco's eyes, indicating that he probably hadn't slept. What happened? Did they discover something new? Marco nodded, leading them to a more private adjacent room where Victor and Olivia were working on various computers. Aaron briefly regained consciousness during the early morning hours, he explained. He managed to say a few words before passing out again. He mentioned a name, Salon Corporation. Fiona frowned. The multinational technology company. Exactly. Our main competitor in the development of artificial intelligence. For years they've been trying to surpass our innovations, always one step behind. If they could achieve Aurora, they would have a huge competitive advantage, Chiara added, demonstrating that she understood the situation. Marco looked at her approvingly. Exactly, but what Aaron said next was even more disturbing. He mentioned that he's inside, right at the top. A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone absorbed the implication. Someone in the upper echelons of Allianz Technology might be working for the competition. Luca, Chiara asked, remembering the finance director and his calculated reaction the previous night. It's a possibility we're investigating, Marco replied cautiously. But we need concrete evidence before making any formal accusations. Olivia looked up from her computer. The investigations into the unauthorized access confirmed that Luca's credentials were used, but we also found attempts using Pietro's credentials, and even yours, Mr. Allianz. So they're trying to create confusion, to sow doubt, Fiona observed. Or spread suspicion among us all, Victor added. Divide and conquer. Chiara, who was listening attentively, had a sudden idea. What if I could help find out who's involved? All eyes turned to her, a mixture of surprise and skepticism. How? Marco asked. Nobody pays attention to children, Chiara explained, especially poor children. I can walk around the offices, listen to conversations, observe behavior. People speak more freely when they think I'm not understanding or paying attention. Marco seemed hesitant. It's too dangerous if the conspirators find out you're helping us. They already know, Chiara argued, at least about my initial involvement, but they don't know that I'm still here helping with the investigation. They might think I was just an occasional witness who has already been dismissed. Fiona looked at the girl with a mixture of admiration and concern. I don't know if this is a good idea, Chiara. These people are dangerous. My grandmother always says that the deadliest danger is the one you don't see coming, Chiara replied confidently. I'm prepared. I know how to be invisible when necessary. Marco observed the determination in the girl's eyes. There was something extraordinary about that child who had grown up on the margins of society, something that went beyond courage, an almost ancient wisdom, as if she had already lived much more than her few years suggested. After a few moments of reflection, he nodded slowly. Let's establish some safety rules. You'll never truly be alone. We'll have people discreetly watching, and at the first sign of danger, the operation ends. Victor looked about to protest, but Marco raised his hand, silencing him. Chiara's idea has merit. People let their guard down around children, and she has already proven her shrewdness. Olivia cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. I have a suggestion. We can create a cover for Chiara, something that explains her presence in the building without raising suspicion. Like what? Fiona asked. Their social program, Olivia replied. The Allianz Foundation has several initiatives for young people from disadvantaged communities. We could say that Chiara is participating in a corporate immersion day, learning about how the company works. Marco agreed. Excellent idea. This will give her the freedom to move around different departments without arousing suspicion. The plan was quickly devised. Chiara would be officially introduced as a participant in an Allianz Foundation mentorship program. Fiona would be assigned as her chaperone, leading her on a guided tour of the company's various departments. In reality, they would be observing suspicious behavior and gathering information. Remember, Marco instructed as they prepared, we're dealing with intelligent and possibly desperate people. Keep your eyes and ears open, but don't take unnecessary risks. Chiara nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. It was like those spy games she used to invent with the few children who were friends in the neighborhood, except now the consequences were real. Before leaving, however, she had another idea. Can I talk to my grandmother now? She might have some advice. She's been through similar situations. Marco agreed, and Fiona handed Chiara a secure phone. Stepping aside to a corner of the room, she dialed Viola's home number. Helena answered on the first ring, as if she were sitting next to the phone, waiting. "Chiara, is that you, girl?" The grandmother's familiar voice finally brought forth the tears Chiara had been holding back. "Yes, Grandma, it's me. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, don't worry about me," Helena replied firmly. "Viola is treating me like a queen. The important thing is you. What a mess you've gotten yourself into, huh?" Chiara briefly explained the situation, omitting the most alarming details so as not to worry her grandmother. Helena listened in silence, and when her granddaughter finished, she sighed deeply. "I've seen this movie before, girl. Powerful people fighting each other, using any means necessary to win. The innocent always get caught in the crossfire. I'm being careful, Grandma, I promise, and Mr. Allianz is protecting us." Helena made a skeptical sound. "Powerful men protect their own interests first, remember that. But if you say he's trustworthy, I'll believe you for now." There was a brief silence, and then Helena spoke again, her voice lower and more intense. "Listen, Chiara, I'm going to give you the same advice my father gave me when I was about your age, during the early days of the war. Pay attention to the insignificant details, how someone holds a cup, the rhythm of their breathing when certain words are spoken, the eyes that avoid contact at specific moments. The truth always seeps through these small cracks that people don't even know they have." Chiara smiled, recognizing her grandmother's characteristic wisdom. "I'll pay attention, Grandma, and I'll be home soon, I promise. Take care, little eagle, and remember, not all enemies show their teeth before attacking." With that warning echoing in her mind, Chiara hung up and returned to Fiona and the others. The mission was about to begin. After a brief preparation, Chiara and Fiona left the executive area and began their guided tour of the Allianz Tower floors. To complete the disguise, Fiona carried a clipboard with a schedule of activities and information about the departments, while Chiara wore a visitor badge attached to her sweatshirt with the company logo. The first department they visited was marketing, where dozens of professionals worked in open cubicles, creating advertising campaigns and communication strategies. Fiona introduced Chiara as a talented student from the Allianz Foundation's social program, selected to learn about the company's operations. The employees smiled politely. Some offered candies or small promotional gifts, but soon returned to their tasks. While Fiona chatted with the department director, Chiara discreetly wandered between the workstations, observing conversations, notes on post-it notes, behaviors. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, until her gaze caught a detail. At one of the more secluded desks, a woman of about 40 years old was nervously talking on the phone, covering her mouth with her hand to muffle the conversation. Feigning interest in a nearby poster, Chiara moved close enough to overhear fragments of the conversation. "I can't talk now. Yes, I'm aware of the seriousness. I know he doesn't suspect anything yet." The woman noticed Chiara's proximity and immediately ended the call, giving her an irritated look. Chiara smiled innocently and pointed to the poster. "That drawing is really cool. Did you make it?" The woman visibly relaxed at the childish question. "No, dear, it was the graphic design team 2 floors below." Nodding as if the information were fascinating, Chiara stepped away, memorizing the name on the workstation. Anna Ollins, Corporate Communications Manager. When she met with Fiona again, she discreetly whispered to her about the suspicious conversation. Fiona made a discreet note on her clipboard and led Chiara to the next department. Throughout the morning, they visited human resources, finance, and legal. In each location, Chiara remained alert, absorbing information that most people would ignore. In the finance department, she noticed that several employees seemed especially tense, speaking in whispers and interrupting conversations when someone approached. Most significantly, there was no sign of Luca, the finance director. "Where is Mr. Luca today?" Chiara innocently asked an administrative assistant. The woman seemed momentarily uncomfortable. "Director Carmen is in a very important meeting outside the office. He shouldn't be back until tomorrow." Fiona and Chiara exchanged meaningful glances. This information would be vital for Marco. At lunchtime, they headed to the executive restaurant on the 25th floor. While helping themselves at the buffet, Chiara spotted Pietro, the young computer genius she had met the previous day. Unlike the other executives who were clustered around tables chatting animatedly, Pietro sat alone, engrossed in his tablet, as he distractedly rummaged through a salad. "Can we sit with that man?" Chiara asked Fiona. "He seems lonely." Fiona hesitated briefly but agreed. They approached Pietro's table, who looked up in surprise when Fiona asked permission to join him. "Ah, of course," she replied, pushing some papers aside to make room. Then she recognized Chiara. "You're the girl from yesterday." "We're giving a guided tour of the company," Fiona explained quickly. "It's part of the Foundation's social program." Pietro nodded, though his gaze showed he didn't fully believe the explanation. "How has your experience been so far?" he asked Chiara. "Interesting. People here seem very busy, especially in the finance department. Everyone is super stressed." Pietro smiled slightly. "It doesn't surprise me. When there are problems, finance is always the first to feel the impact." "What kind of problems?" Chiara asked, maintaining a casual tone. The young computer scientist glanced discreetly around before answering. "Let's just say the project we were working on suffered a setback, and that has serious financial implications," Fiona interjected, trying to extract more information without seeming obvious. "I heard that Director Carmen is in an external meeting today." Pietro raised his eyebrows. "Really? Funny, because I could swear I saw him in the underground security lab about an hour ago." This information caused Chiara and Fiona to exchange an alarmed look. Why lie about Luca's whereabouts? The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a tall, thin man at the table, the same man Chiara had seen talking to Aaron in the video she had recorded. "Pietro, we need to review the new safety protocols," he said, completely ignoring Chiara and Fiona's presence. Then, as if only then noticing them, he added coldly, "Sorry for interrupting." Pietro seemed uncomfortable. "Alan, these are Fiona and Chiara. They're giving you a guided tour of the company." Alan looked at Chiara with a disturbing intensity. For a terrifying moment, she feared he would recognize her from the previous day. But his face remained impassive. "Delighted," he said without any tone suggesting sincerity. "Pietro, I'm waiting for you in room 2507. Don't be long." With that, he walked away quickly. "Who is he?" Chiara asked, trying to keep her voice casual despite her racing heart. "Alan Lyman, Deputy Director of Information Security," Pietro replied, already gathering his belongings. "Don't be bothered by his coldness. He's like that with everyone." He hesitated briefly before adding, "Listen, perhaps you should conclude this visit earlier today. The atmosphere isn't very welcoming." With that, Pietro stepped away, leaving Chiara and Fiona alone at the table, processing the new information. Alan Lyman, the man in the video, held a high-level position in the company's security, an alarming fact in itself. And Luca Carmen, supposedly in an external meeting, had been seen in the underground security lab. "We need to inform Mr. Alliance," Fiona murmured, discreetly picking up the phone. Chiara, however, was already thinking about the next step. "Before that, we need to find out what Luca is doing underground." Fiona looked at her with alarm. "Don't even think about it. It's too risky." "It's riskier to let them complete whatever they're planning," Chiara argued. "Remember what Mr. Alliance said? We're dealing with desperate people, and desperate people make mistakes." Fiona seemed torn between her duty to protect Chiara and the logic of her argument. Finally, she let out a resigned sigh. "Let's inform Marco first. Then if he approves, we can investigate the subsoil, but together and with security support." Chiara agreed, although in her mind she was already formulating an alternative plan. Her grandmother always said that sometimes asking for forgiveness was more effective than asking for permission. While Fiona was on the phone with Marco, Chiara watched the restaurant, studying the faces of the executives who were happily having lunch, unaware of the storm brewing within the company. How many of them were involved? How many were innocent? And more importantly, who, besides Luca and Alan, was at the center of the conspiracy? The answer, she suspected, was hidden several floors below, in the underground laboratories of the Allianz Tower. Marco's decision was swift and definitive. "Absolutely not. It's far too dangerous for you two to approach the underground security lab right now." His voice, through the secure phone Fiona was holding, left no room for argument. Chiara bit her lip in frustration as Fiona relayed the new instructions. Return immediately to the executive floor and personally report all findings. The administrative assistant hung up the phone and put it in her bag with a relieved sigh. "Come on, Chiara. Mr. Allianz is sending Victor to escort us back." They left the executive restaurant and headed towards the elevators. While they waited, Chiara noticed unusual activity near the door leading to the emergency stairs. Maintenance workers carrying large boxes of equipment to the basement. An idea flashed through her mind, quick as lightning. "Fiona, I need to go to the bathroom before we go upstairs." Fiona hesitated. "Victor should be arriving soon. Can't he wait?" "It's urgent," Chiara insisted, with her most convincing expression. "It'll only take 2 minutes, I promise. The women's restroom is right over there." Reluctantly, Fiona agreed. "Okay, but be quick. I'll be waiting right here." Chiara nodded and walked toward the women's restroom. As soon as she turned the corner, however, she abruptly changed direction, making her way silently to the emergency stairwell door. One of the maintenance workers was holding it open while the others descended with the equipment. With her heart pounding, she waited for the opportune moment. When the last employee passed through the door and the first turned to follow the group, Chiara slipped through the opening, quick and silent as a cat. The man didn't notice her presence, too busy with the logistics of transporting heavy equipment. On the concrete staircase, Chiara could hear the voices of the employees a few flights below. She followed them at a safe distance, her footsteps muffled by their heavy boots. 2 floors below, a sign read, "Level S3 Security Laboratories Restricted Access." The employees used a magnetic card to open the security door, and Chiara waited, hidden in the stairwell. When the door began to close automatically, she ran, sliding through the opening at the last possible second. He found himself in a white, aseptic corridor, very different from the upper floors decorated with wood and contemporary art. It looked more like a hospital or government research center, with fluorescent lights and numbered armored doors. The employees had disappeared into one of the rooms, and Chiara could hear the muffled sound of their voices. Moving cautiously, she examined the corridor. At the end of it, a larger room with glass walls housed servers and sophisticated equipment. Inside, 2 figures were conversing with energetic gestures. Chiara approached slowly, keeping close to the wall. From a safe distance, she recognized the people she was talking to. Luca Carmen and Alan Limon, the 2 main suspects in the conspiracy. The room wasn't completely soundproof, and fragments of the conversation reached her. "Time is running out. The transfer needs to be completed today. Aurora is still incomplete. We need the rest of the code. Salon is impatient. The payment has already been made." Luca seemed agitated, running his hand through his impeccably combed hair in an unusual gesture for his normally controlled persona. Alan, on the other hand, maintained his usual composure, but his clenched fists betrayed tension. Chiara needed to record that conversation somehow. She patted her pockets, searching for the old cell phone she had used the previous day, but remembered she had left it in the office apartment. Looking around, she noticed a control panel near the server room door. There was a small digital display showing the lab's security cameras. A risky idea formed in her mind. She approached the panel, trying to decipher how it worked. It seemed simple. A menu of security options, including manual recording. If she could activate that function without being noticed. Suddenly, a third person entered the server room, interrupting Luca and Alan's conversation. Chiara instinctively shrank back, but the newcomer didn't look in her direction. It was Pietro, the young computer scientist, looking even more nervous than during lunch. "We need to talk," he said to Luca, loud enough for Chiara to hear clearly. "Right now." Luca made an annoyed gesture. "We're in the middle of something important." "It's about Aurora," Pietro insisted. "Allianz is assembling a special task force. He knows there was a leak." This information seemed to alarm Luca and Alan. They exchanged glances, and after a moment of hesitation, Luca nodded. "Let's go to the conference room in the basement. There we can talk without interruptions." The 3 men headed for a door at the opposite end of the corridor, leaving the server room momentarily empty. It was the opportunity Chiara needed. She quickly entered the room and approached the main computer. The screen displayed lines of code and complex diagrams that she didn't understand, but one detail caught her attention. A progress bar indicating data transfer 78% complete. Next to the computer, a small device connected via USB cable blinked green lights. Chiara recognized it as a high-capacity external storage device. It was being used to copy whatever was on the screen. Without thinking twice, she unplugged the device and hid it in her sweatshirt pocket. Her heart was pounding so hard, she feared the sound could be heard down the hallway. She needed to get out of there, and fast. Just as he turned to leave the room, however, he heard voices approaching again. Looking frantically around, he spotted a work table with a gap underneath, partially covered by side panels. With no other option, he squeezed himself into this confined space, shrinking as much as possible. The voices grew louder, and Chiara recognized Alan's irritated tone. A waste of time. Pietro is paranoid. Allianz doesn't know anything concrete yet. Don't underestimate Marco, Luca replied, entering the room. He didn't build an empire by being naive. Through a small crack between the panels, Chiara could see Luca's Italian shoes moving around the room. He stopped abruptly near the computer. The drive. Where is the drive? The panic in Luca's voice was palpable. Alan approached quickly, and Chiara saw his black shoes stop beside Luca's. It was here 5 minutes ago, said Alan, his normally controlled voice now trembling slightly. Are you sure you didn't put it away? Of course I'm sure, exclaimed Luca. We were in the middle of the transfer. After a tense silence, Alan spoke, his voice dangerously low. Someone was here. Chiara felt a shiver run down her spine. She held her breath as the two men began to search the room, opening drawers and checking the equipment. The cameras, Alan said suddenly. Let's watch the security footage. The sound of keys being pressed filled the room, followed by a muffled exclamation from Alan. The recording system was deactivated 10 minutes ago. Someone knew what they were doing. Or we were very lucky, Luca murmured. Check the hallway. If someone took the drive, they couldn't have gone far. Alan quickly left the room while Luca remained, cursing under his breath as he furiously typed on the computer. Chiara could feel the device in her pocket, heavy as a silent accusation. If she were discovered now. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening again. Luca stopped typing. And then? He asked. The voice that answered wasn't Alan's, but Pietro's. He's being detained right now. Corporate security. What? Exclaimed Luca, genuinely shocked. How? The girl, Pietro replied, his voice trembling. The girl you ignored. She and the administrative assistant notified Allianz about suspicious activity. They'd been watching Alan since lunch. A heavy silence fell over the room. Chiara could feel the tension growing in the air, almost tangible. And what about me? Luca finally asked. There are no arrest warrants yet, Pietro replied. But it won't be long. We need to act now, Luca. The original plan is compromised. Luca let out a heavy sigh. The drive with the partial transfer has disappeared. Someone was here in the last few minutes and took it. This changes everything, said Pietro, his voice now firmer. We need to implement the contingency plan immediately. Are you sure? It's risky and will expose us all. We have no choice, Pietro insisted. A coordinated attack on the main servers is our only chance now. Once the system is compromised, nobody will care about a lost drive. Chiara felt her blood run cold. The plan was more complex and dangerous than they had imagined. And what was worse, Pietro, who seemed to be helping with the investigation, was actually part of the conspiracy. All right, Luca agreed after a few seconds of reflection. Activate the Delta sequence. That should create enough chaos to give us cover. And what about the girl? The witness? Pietro asked. Luca made a dismissive gesture with his hand. A secondary concern now. She's probably locked away in some executive office far away from here. If only he knew how wrong he was, Chiara thought, barely able to contain her breath, which was ragged with fear. I'm going to the control center to start the sequence, said Pietro, heading towards the door. And I need to erase any trace of our involvement before security gets here, Luca replied. We'll meet at the extraction point in 30 minutes. The door closed, and Chiara heard Luca moving around the room, typing on different terminals, probably eliminating evidence. Each second felt like an eternity as she remained motionless in her cramped hiding place, the stolen device burning in her pocket like an ember. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Luca left the room. Chiara waited a few seconds to make sure he had really left, then emerged from her hiding place, her muscles aching from being in an uncomfortable position for so long. I needed to warn Marco immediately. The attack on the servers, the so-called Delta sequence, could be starting at that very moment. But how could I get out of the basement without being seen? The emergency stairs were certainly being monitored now. She looked around, searching for inspiration. Her eyes landed on a ventilation duct in the ceiling, large enough for someone as small as her. Helena used to say that, in desperate situations, the most improbable solutions became viable. Dragging a chair under the duct opening, Chiara climbed up and tested the metal grate. It was held in place by screws, but not very tightly. Using a pen she found on the table, she managed to loosen them enough to remove the grate. With considerable effort, he hoisted himself into the ventilation duct. The space was cramped but navigable for someone his size. He began to crawl, guiding himself by the distant sound of air conditioning equipment. The ventilation system was a metal labyrinth with bifurcations and intersections that left her disoriented. Trying to remain calm, Chiara reasoned if she followed the airflow, she would eventually reach an exit. After several minutes of slow, claustrophobic progression, she heard muffled voices coming from a grate below. Approaching carefully, she could see part of a conference room. Marco was there, surrounded by Victor, Olivia, and several other executives. They all seemed tense, staring at computer screens and speaking rapidly. "Mr. Allianz," he tried to shout, but his voice was muffled by the surrounding metal. No one in the room seemed to notice. Frustrated, Chiara banged on the metal railing with her hand. This time, some heads turned upwards, confused. "Up here!" he shouted even louder. "In the ventilation duct!" Victor was the first to identify the source of the sound. "There's someone in the ducts!" he exclaimed, already reaching for his weapon. "It's me, Chiara!" she shouted, pressing her face against the railing to be seen. The shock was visible on the faces below. Marco approached quickly, while Victor climbed onto a chair to reach the railing. "Good heavens, girl, how did you end up there?" Marco asked, his voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Long story," Chiara replied as Victor removed the grate. "But I have important information. And this." As soon as she was helped down from the duct, she showed the storage device she had stolen. They were transferring data from Aurora to do this. It's part of their plan. Marco carefully picked up the device, examining it briefly before handing it to Olivia. "Analyze it immediately. See what they managed to copy." Turning to Chiara, her tone became more serious. "Where's Fiona? You two should have come back together." A weight of guilt hit Chiara in the chest. In the adrenaline of the moment, she had completely forgotten that she had left Fiona waiting on the 25th floor. "I separated from her. I said I was going to the bathroom, but I went to investigate the basement alone." Marco frowned, clearly disappointed by his recklessness. "Victor, locate Fiona immediately." As Victor left to carry out the order, Chiara quickly explained everything she had seen and heard in the security lab. The conversation between Luca and Alan, Pietro's arrival and the revelation that he was also part of the conspiracy, and finally the contingency plan called Delta Sequence. "They're going to attack the main servers," he concluded. Pietro said he would create enough chaos to provide cover for their escape. Olivia, who was analyzing the device's contents, raised her head in alarm. "It's already started. We're suffering a massive intrusion across all systems. Servers are crashing one after another." As if to confirm his words, the lights in the room flickered, and the computer screens displayed error messages. "Backup system," Marco ordered. "Initiate isolation protocols now." The room transformed into a crisis command center, with Olivia coordinating the digital defense, while other executives received constant updates on the situation in different departments of the building. "Locate Luca and Pietro," Marco ordered, "and increase security at all exits of the building. No one enters or leaves without a thorough check." Victor returned at that moment, his face tense. "Sir, we haven't been able to locate Fiona. The cameras on the 25th floor show her waiting in the elevators, and then nothing. She simply disappears from view." A heavy silence fell over the room. Chiara felt her heart clench. What if something had happened to Fiona because of her? "They got her," he murmured, guilt growing in his chest. "They must have realized I was missing and figured she'd know where to find me." Marco placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze steady but not accusatory. "Don't blame yourself. No one could have predicted this. Now we need to focus on finding her and stopping the conspirators before it's too late." The lights flickered again, and this time several monitors went completely dark. An IT technician rushed into the room. "Mr. Allianz, The building's security systems are being compromised. Doors, elevators, cameras, they're taking control of everything. Marco remained calm, even in the face of the escalating crisis. Ghost protocol, he ordered. Isolate the core of the Aurora on disconnected physical servers and locate Luca and Pietro immediately. While the team scrambled to contain the crisis, Chiara stood in the center of the room, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. Her small act of disobedience had triggered a chain of events that now threatened the entire company, and worse, put Fiona in danger. Marco's determined gaze met Chiara's. "I have a plan," he said, typing a sequence on his cell phone. "Aurora Alpha System. My personal password." Immediately the lights stabilized. A subtle smile appeared on Marco's face. "A hidden system that only I know about. We've just regained control." The monitors lit up, displaying a map of the building with 3 moving red dots. "Luca, Pietro, and Fiona!" exclaimed Chiara, pointing to the third point. "Basement 3, trying to access the emergency tunnel," confirmed Victor, already mobilizing the team. 15 minutes later, the doors to the room opened. Victor entered, accompanied by security guards who were escorting the handcuffed conspirators and a visibly shaken but unharmed Fiona. "They held me hostage to ensure their escape," she explained, hugging Chiara tightly. While the police arrived and Olivia confirmed that the Aurora was safe, Marco approached Chiara. "We have a proposal for you and your grandmother Helena," he said. "A safe apartment and a full scholarship. The world needs young people with your courage and intelligence." Hours later, returning home in an official company car, Chiara smiled as she imagined Helena's reaction. That saying her grandmother used to repeat so often made sense now. The winds change direction for those who know how to adjust their sails. Looking out the window at the city that now seemed different, Chiara knew that her life had changed forever, not by luck, but by the courage to follow her instincts when everyone doubted her. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Chiara and Helena's journey has touched your hearts. For more equally moving and engaging stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist that you can find by clicking the link on the left. If this story of courage and determination captivated you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring you new stories that explore the complexities of life and the strength of the human spirit. Share in the comments which moment of this story moved you the most. We'd love to know what you felt. Until the next extraordinary story.